Hi everyone, my name is Alicia Sawyer and I'm currently enrolled in the capstone project for my master's in Human Resources and Organizational Development at Champlain College. And I thank Northwestern Medical Center for allowing me the opportunity to explore employee engagement opportunities and make some recommendations for the organization as part of my class. I want to start by giving you some background on how we set the stage and identified the need for the project. Employee engagement is something that's highly valued by the organization, and that's demonstrated through the strategic plan that was outlined and approved by the Board of Directors for fiscal years 22 through 24, which does include engagement as one of the three main pillars. This project worked well in terms of it being aligned with the timing of a recent Press Ganey employee engagement survey and allowed for some additional information to further develop and hone in on next steps. This project specifically focused on coaching as an intervention or a tactic to support and develop employee engagement through all levels of the organization in support of the themes and findings in the data collection. As we look at what our opportunity is here at Northwestern Medical Center, I would start with the raw data from the employee engagement survey, which shows that Northwestern is currently in the 7th percentile when compared to their peers nationally in terms of employee engagement. However, the survey participation was strong. We had over 400 respondents in the survey, and this data allows us to gather information and guides our next steps. Well, I would like to note that Northwestern Medical Center has experienced significant changes and challenges over the last few years. Those have included multiple leadership transitions, financial challenges, the COVID-19 pandemic, workforce shortages, while also dealing with patient surge and capacity issues. One other point that I'd like to make that I think supports this work very well is that senior leadership and the board of directors have demonstrated a true commitment to building and sustaining an engaged workforce, which helps to set the stage for a meaningful and active engagement effort. So why worry about employee engagement, or why think about it? Why measure it? Why do we want to focus on this? Disengaged employees cost organizations lots of money, and that could be for many reasons: low productivity, and of course the high cost of employee turnover. An organization is only as strong as its members. I always think of a corporate cup event, a local race in Vermont, where a local power company, all of the people from their company wear the same shirt, and on the back of their shirt says, "Our power is our people." And I think that's a really strong message to say that we are who we employ, and it's important that we invest in their growth and development. It's important for leaders within an organization to have frequent open communication with employees in order to continue to gauge culture, satisfaction, engagement, while strengthening relationships and building trust. And this is a theme that you'll see throughout the presentation as we discuss findings. The project started with a stakeholder analysis to understand who would be impacted and who would be involved in any kind of employee engagement process. And so in this grid, we rank the different stakeholders based on their level of power and decision-making ability, and then with their level of interest. So I've grouped them into 4 different categories: the high power, low interest, and the keep satisfied, board of directors, leaders not directly involved in the project, and leaders not aligned with project goals. Then the high power, high interest would be the manage closely. This would be the senior leadership team, leaders involved directly in the project, and leaders whose goals are aligned with the project goals. In the low interest, low power section, I have employees not directly involved with the project. They will be impacted, but if they're not directly involved, we would need to approach their communication and involvement at the monitor level. And then at the high interest and low power, I have employees directly involved in the project. So this stakeholder analysis was important in designing and implementing the communication plan about the project. And I would encourage the organization to use a similar design when rolling out communication structures or vehicles in the future. Who needs to be communicated when and how? So this was a useful tool in developing this project to decide with individuals what level of information they would want and what frequency they would like that communication delivered. The data collection plan for the project included 3 different methods of obtaining information. First, the employee engagement survey. The Press-Ganey survey did include 80 questions, of which I had to hone that down to 20 questions from the originals that were asked. I conducted 2 observation sessions, one of the senior leadership presentation of the full Press-Ganey employee engagement summary results, and a second observation of a leadership discussion about the employee engagement survey executive summary. I then conducted interviews with members of senior leadership, as well as employees. The survey questions, I'm not going to read through each of these individually, but they're grouped in 4 important stages. So I approached this project through the appreciative inquiry framework. And so that means we need to follow these stages. First, discovery. What's happening? What are we currently dealing with? What's our current state? Next, dream, which would be what could be. If we could have anything or build anything, what would it look like? What is it? What could it be? Let's have our visioning moment here. Design, build it. How do you reach the dream that you just worked on in your last step? And then finally, and maybe most importantly, deliver. What's our plan to making sure that we're being successful? How are we measuring success? Who's responsible ultimately for delivering what we've designed? I will also note that I did include demographics to include age, ethnicity, gender, job classification, and length of service. And then for my interview questions, I grouped them in the same different stages for appreciative inquiry. For my discovery phase, I asked about opportunities for employee engagement. I also asked about any surprises that they had seen so far or that they had felt or things that had challenged them in the employee engagement survey data that they had seen. I will note that each group of individuals that were interviewed had received a different level of information about the employee engagement data. Dream, ask them what's important to them about employee engagement. Design, what does it take to create meaningful change? What would you suggest for improved employee engagement? I also added a question about who would be responsible for and in charge of the initiative around employee engagement. I will note this question was added after the senior leadership interviews were conducted, so I only have data collected for members of the leadership team and for employees. And then finally, I asked what success will look like. How will Northwestern Medical Center know when the goals around employee engagement have been achieved? A few key points in the data overview that I received, and I tried to pull these apart in moments of celebration and then moments of let's dig a little deeper into these sections. First, 83% of employees reported that the person they report to treats them with respect, which is great. I think that's something that the organization should be really proud of. However, when asked about the organization treating all employees with respect, we had 43% of employees that responded unfavorably or neutrally to that statement. So it appears that there's an opportunity here and a discrepancy between the work unit responses and the organizational response around respect. The second key point that I'd like to pull out, 90% of employees reported that they like the work they do. Something to celebrate as an organization. Something to look at a little deeper though, 52% responded unfavorably or neutrally when asked if they would stay with the organization if offered a similar position elsewhere. I think that demonstrates that we have a workforce that's potentially at risk here at Northwestern Medical Center, and so we want to look at and work on engagement as a tool to retain and recruit as needed a workforce and develop a culture of engagement that employees want to stay and recognize a difference. It's not just the work that they do, but where they do that work. Another key finding, which I found very interesting and I think is an untapped resource potentially, we had 74% of employees report that when appropriate, they can act alone without approval. So some autonomy in their in their work. And then we also had 27 respond unfavorably or neutrally when asked if their job makes good use of their skills and or abilities. So in those numbers, I see some opportunities for either people to be trained up or be able to use their skills and their abilities to the best possible. In the organization, I've heard people comment, people working to the top of their license. I would say people working to the top of their skills and or abilities. How can Northwestern Medical Center capitalize on that? And at the same time, if 74% are working autonomously when it's appropriate, how do we get that number up? How does Northwestern Medical Center build upon that and build a greater capacity within the organization? Some additional findings through my interviews and observation. Across the board, senior leadership was not surprised by the results, which indicates a good understanding of the current pulse of the organization. Through the 100% of the interviews with senior leadership shared that same response. In several of the interviews with senior leadership members, it was noted and recognized that some of employees' basic needs are not being met. Conversations around Maslow's hierarchy of needs, people need to feel safe and secure before they're able to move up that. And further down the road in the presentation, I have another similar setup around hierarchy of needs in the workplace, and I'll come back to this point. Leadership members expressed concern with not having the data from the employee engagement survey released to them. They recognized that staff often mirrors energy attitude brought by the unit leader, so recognizing that the power that the manager, leader, director, supervisor brings is important. Employees saw opportunities for better communication throughout the organization. They reported that they're missing connection and community building. And employees, more than anything, want to feel that their voices and ideas matter. This was reflected through survey data as well as through interview data. This is Chip Conley from a TED Talk around measuring what matters in the workplace, talks about what the hierarchy of needs is in a workplace. And so that's the image that you see down in the bottom corner. And the very first level is survival, the next one success, and then finally transformation. So for an organization to achieve that success and transformation, we've got to make sure that the workforce has what they need and is beyond the survival stage. So an important point that was reflected on a lot of the interview conversations. So the four areas that emerged during the research really were very, very interconnected. And those included communication, respect, trust, and then misalignment, disconnect between senior leadership and employees. I think these are all connected, and I think improving one will improve another, and ultimately impact that misalignment disconnect that we have seen in the data between senior leadership and employees. Through improved and increased communication, we'll see an increase in respect and trust, and then we'll see that disconnect or misalignment, that gap get shortened in between senior leadership and employees. Respect and trust is not something that can be manufactured. It needs to be developed and built through intentional relationship building. Recommendations that I have for Northwestern Medical Center at this time is to really focus in on senior leadership and leaders learning how to learn. And I would recommend doing that through a coaching program. But encouraging and teaching our leaders how to ask for feedback, listen to the feedback, think about the feedback, thank the person who's giving them the feedback, respond to it, and then follow up on it. How am I doing? I told you that my goal was to communicate with you more regularly. I made that goal a month ago. How is that going for you? Am I communicating at the level that you need me to communicate with you? But really checking in with people I understand that there's a leadership cohort training going on throughout the organization, and I'm interested to know if this sort of feedback loop has been established, and if the managers, directors, leaders who are participating in that are working with their direct reports and employees to say, these are the goals that I've identified through this work. How am I doing? And being open and honest in that. And I think building those kinds of opportunities for meaningful conversation and connection will help to reestablish that trust and relationship and show the employees that they are respected by their leaders because they're being asked for feedback around their experience with them, and will ultimately improve that relationship. One really important thing that I wanted to highlight on this slide is that engagement and job satisfaction truly comes from employees feeling that they belong, that they're competent, they have trust and power to act in an autonomous way, which is something that was reflected in the survey data. So the more we can coach, grow, develop employees to the full extent of their skills and ability, and empower them to act independently, is going to do two things for the organization. It's going to first provide a more engaged workforce, but second, provide for some of the staffing challenges and capacity issues that we've seen. If we have a workforce that's being underutilized, that's an opportunity to grow, develop, and further support the organization in the areas of need. There were several ways that people suggested that we measure for success. And this is tricky. There's some tangible things, right? We can repeat survey in 18 to 24 months. We can look at raw data like turnover data. We can look at referral bonuses to see, are we paying more out? Are people demonstrating pride in working for Northwestern Medical Center? But there was another part of the conversation with the interviews where people really talked about, how do you measure a feeling? It will feel different. We talked a lot about how the tone of things, the culture of things, teamwork, gratitude, how do you measure that? And so interesting ideas around how we measure that as an organization. Some of those included attendance at employee events, tone of conversations in the hallway, tone of conversations among leaders, smiling faces, shared stories of success, basic needs of employees recognized and responded to, creativity demonstrated. When people feel safe and secure, they're able to get into their, further up their brainstem and have those moments of critical thinking and work in that creativity and be excited about change. Did hear that as a continuous theme through interviews as well. People who are bringing solutions along with the problems that they're raising. Other areas that we have some raw data potentially would be financial success for the organization and a reduced number of call-outs. The final question that I asked, and again, this question was only asked of leaders, so managers, directors, supervisors, and employees. I asked who was responsible to manage, who at the end of the day owns employee engagement. And across the board, everybody said that this is the responsibility of the leadership team. So this is the responsibility of those supervisors, managers, and directors. However, that group needs support, encouragement, and accountability provided by senior leadership. That was the determination on how we would measure success. I want to thank you for listening to my presentation, and I appreciate the time and the honesty, transparency, and communication that the organization allowed me to have, and with all of the people who were kind enough and brave enough to share their stories with me. Thank you so much.